Hey, David here. We are live. Very pleased and happy to have Caleb from American Decay, Frontierman. We talk about the state of Michigan's infrastructure. People who follow me regularly know that I'm a landlord. I manage properties. I went to University of Michigan, studied civil engineering, although I never really practiced much in the field. I have a regular weekend review Sunday nights, and I've talked many times. I've shared many videos from its history and Bright Sun films. I also like Defunctland and other ones that focus on Disneyland. But I love these. I love watching these videos of people that explore these urban sites that are largely in decay and in ruins, and so I found just last month this channel called American Decay, the Modern Frontiersman, and it had over like 70 videos in Michigan, and I found it fascinating. I watched all of them. I loved to give a little historical background, so I commented on the videos and he replied, and I asked him if he did interviews. So here we have Caleb from American Decay, and if you could introduce yourself, whatever biographical information if you want to give, or if you don't want to give any, that's fine also. But your most interesting, how'd you come to doing this? What's the origin of your channel? And like how long have you been doing this? Hopefully that'll lead into an interesting discussion about the state of infrastructure, God forbid, here in Michigan. It's really bad, and possibly the construction and what would happen if someone tried to buy and fix up some of these sites.
Oh, my name is Caleb Dockham from American Decay. Thank you for having me on. Uh, Originally, I started doing this back in 2019. I used to be in the Army. I was stationed down in El Paso. And the reason I started filming originally was because I had a friend of mine he had some financial trouble, and he wanted, he needed money, but he didn't want to just like accept a handout. He wanted like a job. And I was really big into watching like videos from creators like Rare Earth and The Proper People. So I decided, just to start filming these documentaries, and then I just fell in love with it. At the time, it gave me an excuse to pay him because, he was like the cameraman. But the first place I ever filmed at was Oro Grande, New Mexico, which is a really cool ghost town. And from there, between 2019 and 2020, I did a whole lot of work in the Southwest, mostly Texas and New Mexico. I went to one place in Arizona. But for the most part, because I'm from Michigan, mostly I've done stuff in Michigan and the Midwest, a little bit on the East Coast, New York, Pennsylvania, but most of it's been, like Michigan, Ohio, a little bit of Indiana and Illinois. But Michigan's probably, the biggest one. And of course, there's a lot to see here in Michigan. I mean, Detroit alone has tons of abandoned places, And on one hand, I think abandoned places have a certain beauty to them. I think they're really just fascinating to see. But on the other hand, there's also the fact that all this urban decay sort of paints a very negative picture of certain regions. I mean, for example, like some of the ghost towns I've been to in New Mexico all have very sort of sordid histories where you have, hundreds, even thousands of people that used to live in these towns, and then they all move out because, the mines dry up, for example, or whatever industry was keeping that town going, leaves. A good example of this would be the company town of Gary, Indiana. I've been to Gary 3 times now. It's known as a very decaying kind of city. Back in, I believe it was 2014, the media dubbed it the serial killer's paradise because there was a killer that was leaving dead bodies in all the abandoned buildings. So it was pretty bad for a while. And the place, it's full of these beautiful, just massive abandoned buildings like schools, the City Methodist Church, this huge, beautiful cathedral. But in recent years, a group called the Rust Devils have been trying to reclaim the city. And the city of Gary, Indiana has actually been starting to demolish a lot of the old ruins, especially with their public school system. They've started to get rid of a lot of their older ruins. I'm fortunate that I got to go to a lot of them before they got demolished. But yeah, there are a lot of places I think they're trying to start to clean up and trying to start to get rid of their abandoned buildings and start, gentrification and stuff like that. And it's something you see even in Detroit a little bit, like the Cadillac stamping plant just got demolished. And that place was beautiful. It was huge, huge abandoned factory. It was also used to be called the Ivan Dover Spike plant. And curiously enough, there are actually old hockey cards, like thousands of hockey cards there. Because the last owner in the 90s, he was using it to store a lot of his stuff, like luxury cars and stuff that he owned. And he used it to store a whole bunch of hockey cards he planned on selling, but he never sold them, and he just kind of left them there. But yeah, Cadillac stamping plant's been demolished, and I know the Lee Plaza Hotel. That's another place I've been to. That's currently undergoing renovations. So Lee Plaza is supposed to reopen and be luxury apartments. There's the Vanity Ballroom. Vanity Ballroom is another beautiful place. It was built way back in the 20s, and it had this whole Mayan aesthetic to it. The ballroom floor actually had velvet cushioning on it, and it had these beautiful Mayan pillars and stuff. And a lot of the architecture is still there. You can still see it, even though it's falling apart. Uh, and the Vanity Ballroom is just an absolutely beautiful place. But it's been kind of stuck in this development hell for years. The owners have been trying to renovate it, but they haven't really done much. But last time I was there a few months ago, they did secure a lot of the holes and stuff that were in the building, and they put up a fence around it. So it looks like they're trying to make some kind of effort towards you know fixing up the building. And it's just one of those things where I think the Vanity Ballroom is a place that I think would be amazing if it got renovated, because it's just such a cool place. And like I would go to a place like that, like if they held events there and stuff like that. Like I would love to go, to see the Vanity Ballroom, and it's renovated with its beautiful just Mayan architecture and stuff like that. You can see here in the video that's actually a soda fountain, because back in the 20s, when during Prohibition, they couldn't sell alcohol. So right there in that little bar, they would sell like soda and stuff like that. But that's up on the second floor where the ballroom is. But yeah, Vanity Ballroom is a
It's
really,
funny.
really cool place.
I had a friend in high school. I'm still friends with him, but I remember that now he actually became a professional party promoter, and he had invited me to maybe it was even at the Vanity Ballroom. I didn't end up going, but he said they make these raves in these abandoned sites, and like people would set up speakers, equipment, and they'd even try to charge money. And this was in high school that I was friends with him, and then I also I remember he got into graffiti artist and became like a tagger, and he would like I was kind of more straight knit. It was like, oh, you can't do that, it's illegal to get a ticket, but go around like tagging things on sites, and so I hadn't thought about that childhood memory until I watched that video, and I thought like, yeah, that's probably what he was talking about, and probably was thousands of people that made some sort of underground party in that site. If maybe the police weren't in on it, or maybe they just no one was there, and then all the graffiti artists. So it's I found your videos fascinating. And hopefully I'll remember to ask you about the graffiti. So was this something that you did as a kid, or just something you said like after the army and you were in Arizona and you started looking at some like old ghost cities and found it interesting, or was it something, or if you grew up, my father grew up in Middle America, and as a kid used to explore caves in like Missouri. I'm not sure if you had or something in your adult years that you came on to.
I think I've always been interested in exploring places. I mean, growing up, like I'm huge into studying like history and stuff like that. And growing up, my favorite era was always like the Age of Sail. I loved hearing about the adventures of these people that cross the ocean and these frontiersmen that, explore America's West and stuff like that and risk their lives to see like new parts of the world. I was always interested in that kind of thing. And as a kid, I was also really interested in like cameras and stuff like that. I would play around with like old video cameras and stuff. I think when I actually started doing this seriously when I was down in El Paso, I think the moment I actually went out to do it properly for the first time, I just like fell in love with it right away. It was like, finding, a thing that you feel like you were always kind of like meant to do, you always wanted to do, but you didn't really know you wanted to do it until you do it, you know what I mean? So it was like the first time I actually went to explore an abandoned building, I was like, yeah, I want to keep doing this. This is freaking awesome.
So, was there like a first time? Did you see other people were doing this and putting videos on YouTube, and decide that you do it also, or did you have a crew of people that you were doing this with and filming, and then just decide to put it up on YouTube? How did it start? Like your page or your friendship with the people that you do this with?
At first, it was pretty much just me and one other guy. His name was Phillips. We went out to do a lot of places around New Mexico and Texas together. And then later on, you'll see if you watch like all that season one content back from like 2019, you'll see there's a lot of different people that show up. At that time, pretty much I just went out with whoever wanted, like, and like a Wednesday or a Thursday, I would just go around the barracks asking, other people like, hey, you want to come to a ghost town with me this weekend. So I actually found a few other people that were interested in doing that and that would regularly join me. And then some people would just join when they had nothing else to do. And they're like, oh, Caleb and, so and so are going to a ghost town this weekend. Yeah, might as well join. Why not? So you'll see, a bunch of
You
different
first
people
started
I went out
exploring.
with.
You first started exploring, then you started filming, and then you started to decide to put it up on YouTube and make a thing out of it, or were you filming, or do you have intentions of putting it up, or like making it public from the beginning?
I always made it public from the very beginning, because when I first started doing it, I didn't really think that I would do it as seriously as I do it now. But I was, at first it was mostly just for fun, but I still put it up onto YouTube. You won't find all those really early ones because I actually went back and refilmed them later on, so they're a little higher. The newer ones are a little higher quality than the originals. But yeah, I always uploaded it to YouTube from the very beginning.
Yeah, actually, I only watched your. You had so many videos, like almost 70 in Michigan. So I actually only ended up watching your Michigan. So I guess you've been doing it 4 years, 5 years now. So you have it divided into
Uh,
seasons.
yeah, since 2019, uh, I always start the new season in October because October is the beginning of the fiscal year. So that's just when I decided to start each new season. But yeah, so we're at season 4 right now. So it started in 2019. So yeah, about 4 years almost. It was actually, I believe, July of 2019 is when I actually started filming. So almost 4 years.
Like a band, you get into like a car and stay in like motels, or you just drive around an area, or you located in an area for a period of time that you just focus on one area at a time.
I guess that depends. Sometimes I would stay in motels like when I went to New York, both times, or when I went to Chicago to film there, stayed up in a motel and stayed there for a few days. And when I'm traveling to a lot of places, like I remember doing one big trip over a 4-day weekend. I went up to that was the one I went to Lubbock, Texas, but I also went to Montoya, New Mexico, and a couple other places in New Mexico. And we kind of went up into New Mexico and went around into Lubbock and back. That was, I think, about a 3-day trip, 3.5-day trip. So for that one, we stayed in motels as we went along. So for those like really big trips, yeah, I'll stay in like motels or hotels as we travel, or stay in one, area if it's like a big city or something. But a lot of times they're just day trips. Like, I only live like 2 hours from Detroit, so if I'm filming in Detroit, I don't really need to stay there overnight. And if it's like relatively close, like Cleveland, that's like a 4 hour drive, 3.5, 4 hour drive, I think. So that's another place where like I don't really need to stay there to film at it. But if I was going to go somewhere like a longer trip, like to Utah or something like that, then yeah, I'd get motels on the way there or something. Something I want to do in the future is get like an Airbnb in like a city in a state or something. Like if I go to Utah, like an Airbnb at Salt Lake City and stay there for like a month and just film and explore the state.
Yeah, I saw, like probably your earlier videos. Look like you came up with more editing, and then you have your tagline. It was like, "You never be forgotten." I kind of like, but it looked like in some of your earlier videos you didn't have that, and then dubbing over the history, that maybe some of your earlier videos was just you exploring in the voices of you and your partners on camera, and then later it looks like you overlaid on the video, like the historical story of the site. Although actually some of them weren't clear. Yeah, I watched a lot of them in two speed or fast forward, and you're trying to find the historical site where you give the history or some of the explanation of the site, and sometimes it's just like caught in the middle of the video. So I guess you use some sort of editing afterwards, and then we'll voice over the history, and how do you research that?
Yeah, a lot of the older content, I wasn't really thinking too much about the videography and stuff like that. Obviously now, I have a drone. I have, I don't use a camcorder anymore. I have the Fujifilm that I use to film with. So now, obviously there's a bigger focus on videography. When I go somewhere, I already have an idea of what I want to do. And, I show up to a place and I'm already thinking like, oh, I need B-roll, I need drone shots, stuff like that. But yeah, starting out, I didn't really do that. I just showed up with a camera and just started walking around. But as for research, there are a lot of different places. The internet's all obviously extremely helpful in finding information. Government records are very helpful. A lot of times, if you can access like building records to find out who owned a place or find out,
Online, or you actually go to the Department of Buildings?
I do it all online. Um,
I did
but
building permits before, so I mean, some places like Detroit, some places have more high tech, government sites where you could just go online and search an address and find out all sorts of information. Some places don't, and
yeah.
you'd actually go to the Department of Buildings or House of Deeds, and you'll get some of those records. So that's um,
Yeah, interviewing people is also helpful. I like to talk to people when I travel, and you've probably seen a few of the documentaries that I've interviewed people in. Um, but I really like, even if it's not on camera, I still like to try to talk to locals or people in the area and kind of get more information from them. If if you want to paint the picture, because these are all real places that people used to live in or work in or whatever. I want to paint a picture to show people that these buildings are extremely important. They're not just abandoned husks, right? They at one point they were full of life, full of people. So I try to portray that by trying to get as much information as I can. I try to interview people if I can. And of course, I like to show photos of what these places used to look like, and video of what they used to look like. Um, One thing that I started doing recently, I think only around season 3, I really started doing this, but I would get like a picture or a video, if I could, of like the location, and I'll try to set up the camera on about the same place, so that way it would cut from like the old photo to what it looks like today. Uh, I like doing that kind of thing because it really kind of puts into perspective what a lot of these places actually looked like. Because when you just look at an abandoned building, sometimes it's hard to imagine where machinery would have been or where people would have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, especially a lot of these things, like in Michigan, the technology has changed. So it'd be like a historical lesson in engineering or technology of why the buildings were set up in the way that they were. That any modern facility would unlikely operate with the same machinery that they that they did back then. So you would take an itinerary, like if you're traveling a region where you have multiple sites that you plan, or you study it and reach out, and then it looks like also sometimes you're just traveling and you find some interesting things on the road. I saw that like the I have to look at the video, the like preacher, like the big the in Michigan, the preacher that preached to Native Americans that has
Oh, the Bishop Baraga Shrine.
yeah, was that something that you were just driving and saw, or that's something you planned out?
That was something that was planned out. I actually went there once in 2019, and I wanted to redo it because, like I said, a lot of that older 2019 stuff wasn't very good. So I wanted to, do justice to that location during our little UP trip there. Um, but yeah, it was a beautiful place, especially in autumn. It looked really, really beautiful up there. But yeah, I think Bishop Baraga is a very important part of Michigan's history, especially the UP. I mean, he's one of many different figures that I feel like are hardly ever talked about when you talk about Michigan history, or just history in general. And of course,
I
including,
never heard of them.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like I'm glad that I found that interesting. You know, other than Michigan, mostly Metro Detroit my whole life, but I've never heard of them.
And then speaking of Detroit, you also have a lot of important people from Detroit's history, like Albert Kahn, for example, the architect. I mean, he's an extremely important figure in Detroit's history. And before I started doing this, I had no idea who he was. I mean, the guy designed freaking almost every building that I've been to in Detroit, especially the big one, the Packard plant, which for the time Packard was super advanced and its architecture was revolutionary with the whole open floor plan with the way the windows were to let light in for the workers and stuff like that. And but yeah, he's an extremely important figure that until I started doing this, I just didn't know anything about him.
So I'd never heard
Uh,
of this. I saw this one. You had like a run in. You said the police came by this
oh
Detroit's
yeah.
Humboldt Woods that I guess is actually private property. And I saw another video. They say it looked like um, you did Cooley High School, but it looks like in Detroit that the Detroit public schools actually have their own separate police that just guard public schools, and they're pretty guarding of the public schools as opposed to most abandoned sites you could just walk up to. But the public schools, is Cooley the only one you did in Detroit, or did you have run-ins with security?
I've done a few schools in Detroit. McCarrow and George Ferris are two other schools I've been to off the top of my head. As for Cooley, I was actually surprised because I heard there was security there, but we just walked in an open window. It was just a window that was smashed out. We just climbed in. But, the thing with these abandoned buildings is, yeah, I have a lot of friends, especially in Detroit, that do a lot of urbex. So there's a lot of talking in between, like in the community, because one minute a building might be open and then the next it might be secured. One minute you might be able to go and film in a place and then like 2 days later it's shuttered and there's, cops outside, there's security cameras. So it can be a gamble on whether or not you can actually get into places sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I've very rarely actually ever encountered like security or law enforcement in Humboldt, when they showed up, they seemed like they didn't really care. Like they were very, very, like, oh, we have more important things to deal with types. Because like I didn't know Humboldt was private property. If you look it up on Google Maps, it says that it's like a public, like landmark, like tourist attraction. And that is one thing that I find interesting is Google Maps will often tell you places you're not supposed to go to are like open to the public. Um, but yeah, so we showed up there, and then the cops just showed up, and they're like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." And I was just like, "Oh, I didn't know that. Google said this was open to the public." And they're like, "No, it's private property." And then they just turned around and left. They didn't even wait to see if we left or not. They just left before we did. But I have had a few other encounters with cops in Detroit in the St. Albertus Catholic school. While we were about to leave, we tried to go. The front door was just wide open, like one of the doors were missing, and there was a lady across the street that was talking to a cop. And I don't know if it was about us or not, but just to be safe, we decided to go out the back. We actually had to climb down from the second-story window and then jump over an 8-foot tall brick like fence, and then we ended up having to go through the woods in the middle of the freaking rain because it started to rain by the time we were leaving. We had to kind of go through the bushes and circle back around to get to the car. The only other time I've encountered cops was in Las Cruces in this abandoned school. The only way in, there was a broken window above the door, and it was probably like maybe like this big. It was really small, so I had to like squeeze through it. It was difficult to get in there, but yeah, somebody called the cops on us. They probably thought we were drug dealers or trying to steal from the school or something. The cops interviewed us, did a little interrogation, but they never arrested us. They just detained us, talked to us for a few minutes, and then let us go. But I
What
think
would be the worst case scenario? I mean, do you know legally, like, would it be a ticket or even like 15 days in prison? What would be the worst case scenario?
it all depends. For the most part, most urban explorers just get let go because, I mean, if all you're doing is taking pictures, depending on the building, most cops and most people generally don't care. If it's privately owned and not owned by like the government or the city, that starts to change a little bit. A lot of it depends on what the private owner wants to do. Again, some locations they'll just let you go. Some locations they'll fine you. And this is why it's always important to talk to other urban explorers and to research before you go places, because there are places that, if I look at it, it's like, okay, so urban explorers are getting caught here, but they're only getting fined like $1,000, so it's not a huge deal. But then there are other places like Cement Land in St. Louis, which I really, really want to go to, but the owners prosecute people like to the max. So you could get up to 2 years in prison for getting caught inside Cement Land. So for me, it's not really worth the risk. You know what I mean? Like
$1,000
there's,
is a sizable sum of money, but you've never even had that.
yeah. I mean, if I was
You
in
know, if you had a
another
big
country,
operation, maybe you could afford to pay the
yeah.
fines. Because
Like
you've
if
never
I
even
was
been
in
fined.
yeah, because I've never been fined or arrested. If I was in another country, then I wouldn't care at all because, if you're in another country, the worst thing they can do is send you back to America. So if I was in another country, I'd go anywhere. I wouldn't care at all. But here, like in America and in Canada, yeah, I'm not really going to take that risk. It's obviously going to be dangerous no matter where you do urban exploration, but I try my best to tailor it around things that are relatively safe, like places that I know I'm not going to get prosecuted for if I go there, or places that if I get fined, it wouldn't be. I mean, getting a fine isn't that huge of a deal. I'd much rather get fined than get, put in jail, you know what I mean? But that's why it's important to do that due diligence and research it. I've seen people like do urban exploration in buildings that are still active, like that there's still people working in and stuff. And although I admire the bravery for something like that, I don't really have arrest me money. I don't got a freaking bank with thousands of dollars in it to pay fines. I don't have like a lawyer that I can call, to bust me out of anything like a lot of these bigger people do. So, I try to keep it on the down low and try to pick places that are, a little less dangerous, if that makes sense. And there are cases like the Plaza Hotel, for example. I
The
probably could
last
have
one in
gotten,
Southfield? Yeah, I noticed
yeah,
you
in
didn't even go into
Southfield.
that.
Yeah, I was actually supposed to because there's a security guard there one day when I went there and I talked to him and he got me in contact with somebody, maybe like a building owner, someone involved in the building. Uh, this is where I screwed up because I should have gotten that guy's information. I didn't, but they set up a time that we were supposed to meet and he was going to let me in the building. Uh, he ended up never showing up, and I screwed up because I didn't get his information when I should have. But so he never showed up, but there was no security that time that I went there the second time to actually film the whole thing. There was no security there. And I was looking around, and around the back, I think I saw a way in. So I could have gone in there. But at the same time, I know that there's security cameras there now. And I know that there's there's regularly patrolling security, even though I didn't see a security guy there that time. I'm not really sure if maybe there was a security guy across the street or something. So, I didn't want to risk it, and to get into this building. It did kind of annoy me though that the guy said he was going to show up and let me in, and he never showed up. So,
This one's only like three
this
miles
is.
from my house. I was in I
Oh,
was in
really?
the Plaza Hotel when it was still in operation, and so that it was a major wedding hall or a place where people right near me would make events would rent out the ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. That so this was your most recent video. They say if you made a few hour trip and so it was semi. You flew your drone with this your personal drone footage.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very impressive building, and it's a shame
I've
what
seen
happened to
Northland
it.
Mall. I forget. I've seen people do Northland Mall, which is right near there also, and that's it's a real eyesore right here in Southfield. Even God forbid, a suburban, relatively nice place in Southfield. Even the strip mall, the Farmer Jack, near my house was like abandoned for almost a decade. The major hub strip mall in the corner of 11 Mile and Lasser was abandoned for like a decade. I mean, it was upkept, and then now it's a medical clinic. But Northland Mall was one of the biggest malls in this area. It's abandoned. I think it's in Decay. You'll probably end up being torn down with those negotiations to buy it. As said, like anyone in Southfield, uh, over 30, over 25 probably remembers going to events at the Plaza Hotel, let alone the sites in Detroit that have been abandoned for decades.
Yeah, freaking. There's so many places, just especially around Detroit and just around the Midwest as a whole, that are like this. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's a shame to see so many abandoned places, but I think it's even more of a shame to see a lot of them torn down. I mean, some of them, like malls, not really that big of a deal, but there's a lot of just really, really beautiful, beautiful places that end up getting destroyed, and then, they're pretty much lost forever. That's why I try so hard to properly document these places, because like the Cadillac stamping plant, for example, that place is gone forever. Nobody is ever going to see it again. And now there's just going to be a random warehouse there. Nobody's going to know what used to stand there. Nobody's going to know the important history of that place. You know what I mean? Unless somebody actually documents it. And there's so many
Yeah, some sites
locations
that were
like that.
preserved, like here I'm showing the South Haven, light on Lake Michigan that looks like it was preserved, and you even have the story about the person. I forget you get the name of the person that was the caretaker, and whoever set aside the money. So some of your stories show sites that have preservation, like the two-story outhouse. Also, is a little bit of an interesting story that was that one that was preserved, the two-story outhouse.
Yeah. Yeah, they rebuilt it in 2017 because it was falling apart. Yeah, there are some places that get preserved. It's really nice to see places that get preserved and like renovated, or keep operating in some way. Um, there is quite a few of them, which is always a good thing to see. It's better to see a place get renovated and get kept up than it is to see it just get torn down. This one was cool. The Acacia. That's actually my dad right there. He served on the Acacia back when he was in the Coast Guard.
Oh, it's your
Yeah,
dad.
that's
Yeah, I
one that.
noticed this one. You had a good interview and full tour.
Yeah, that one is one that I'm really glad got saved, because there's only two of those cutters left, and one of them is a personal yacht that's owned by somebody. And yeah, then the other one's the Acacia, which is a museum now, and I'm really glad that those people preserved the Acacia, and that it's a museum that people can see now. Because I mean, obviously for me, this is one of the few places I've been to that actually has a personal impact on me, because I remember actually being on that ship as a kid, and there's pictures of me as a little kid, like in the captain's chair and stuff like that. And I remember doing events on the Acacia, like 4th of July. They would take out all the families and stuff out on the water, and we see the fireworks and stuff like that. So the Acacia for me is like a personal place, my own history. So that's why it was one of the cooler places to see, and why I'm glad that it got preserved instead of just getting like scuttled or ending up as, some rich guy's, private yacht or something like that.
Yeah, some of these were interesting. For example, your these coal towers that probably you know, it's not the way technology works anymore. And I think you have another one that's really in bad repair and dangerous and could fall anytime. And we could speak more to that about um, what do we do about this? It costs a lot of money to take some of these down. And the question, is it going to be the government, the tax dollars, or a private company? And so these coal towers that probably for decades that's not the way technology and trains have worked. That they use a coal tower like this, but it stands and it's dangerous. Um, so that some of those are pretty interesting. Where it's probably a public hazard that a lot of these, like in Detroit, they're public hazards, but they're largely they're not a danger necessarily environmental dangers like they're green zones or whatever. Some of them, I think you even mentioned, have even nuclear or toxic waste on them. But it's pretty interesting. Um, so I don't know. I mean, you actually discuss a little of the history. I don't know when the last time trains used coal towers like these.
I believe most of those coal towers stopped being used by the 60s. I know there's still some coal trains in operation, but I think those are just like novelty trains. You know what I mean? Um, as far as I'm aware, there's no like actual freight being moved on any kind of coal-powered train. There are several coal trains that are novelty trains that like carry passengers and stuff. But yeah, as for like coal towers like this, I'm pretty sure the last time anyone was used, as far as I'm aware, was around the 60s. I know this one stopped being used in about the 40s. In 19, I want to say it was 54, if I remember right. They removed the stairs. The ladder that led up to the stairs. They removed it because they didn't want people going up into the coal tower. And although the coal tower is a pretty impressive thing to see, I mean, it's a really cool thing to see. But the thing that I always wonder when I see buildings like this is like people take efforts to try to secure them or make it safer, right? Like removing the ladder and stuff like that from there. And I get that doing something like that is way easier and cheaper than like demolishing it or something like that. But it always just goes to show that people know that there's something with the building, right? They know it's abandoned. They know it's sitting there. They know it's dangerous. So you would think at some point in time, somebody would do something about it more than just removing a ladder so you can't climb up in there. Or with other buildings, they're like, do something more than just put up plywood over the windows. You know what I mean? Like, I get that that's the quick solution, but you think,
Maybe you heard of Tragedy of the Commons.
No, I don't think I have.
It's like concept that comes from Britain hundreds of years ago, where you're saying that if you have public property and to like grazing in the olden days where people would graze their cattle, and just saying that people are going to take advantage of public property and destroy it because it's in their advantage, like utilitarianism, where someone and so the question would be who's in charge of it, who's going to do it. So if the company went out of business, so if you're going to say like whoever used to own it, you're going to force them through government penalty to pay for it and do it or else face fines. And then if there is no owner, then someone's got to pay for it. So if it's the tax dollars, then you actually have to go through some sort of bureaucratic process of having a government agency secure funding and go about the paperwork, and that means the money is coming out of the public coffers, and then obviously the government's inefficient, and so the government, if they do it, might cost much more than somebody else, and then if it's just left up to the public, like that's the case. What the expression goes, tragedy of the commons, that on a single individualistic layer, it pays for individuals to take advantage of the system and leave it to somebody else to do, and hence you have like environmental damage like pollution. You're saying that like okay, like one God forbid someone's just going to throw trash outside and leave it for somebody else, or expect someone else to clean it, or if you put a government agency to do it, then everyone's going to throw trash. And so like hopefully we could talk more kind of about what caused this to be the current state. Like obviously here in Detroit with the Belle Isle Zoo, I appreciated that video. I think I went to the Belle Isle Zoo as a kid, maybe even on like a school field trip, and it's a real shame to the city that it closed. And but I mean it's financial. Like Detroit was in serious financial trouble, and there was corruption in the city, and a few $1 million made a big deal that the money's got to come from somewhere, and so they cut the Belle Isle Zoo, and now it's abandoned.
Yeah, I know corruption was a huge reason why it got closed. Belle Isle is one of many victims that got closed down in 2004 and are still abandoned. And then, of course, around 2007, 2008, a lot of stuff got closed too because of the housing market crash. But the thing with the Belle Isle Zoo is that, I mean, it is owned by the city. It's owned by the Park Service there over on Belle Isle. And it's one of those things where it's like, at this point, I don't think you can do anything. I don't think you can save the Belle Isle Zoo. I think it's too far decayed. Even just walking up on those wooden planks, I mean, you can tell it's falling apart. I don't think the zoo has much longer. Those wooden planks are rotted through. A bunch of them are missing, and when you walk on them, they're bowing like this a lot. Like honestly, every time you step on one of those, it feels like it's about to cave in. So you got to walk on those wooden struts that go across. You can't walk in the middle of those planks because it feels like they're about to. You see it right there. You can see those the struts in between. You got to walk on those instead of walking right in the middle of the planks. Because those planks, each one of them, it kind of bows. They're starting to rot away and they're starting to fall apart. And, I don't think it'll be much longer until those planks are almost entirely gone. And walking up there would be pretty much impossible after that. So I don't know what, the city or what anyone is planning to do with the Belle Isle Zoo. I know the Belle Isle Aquarium was saved. That was abandoned for a while. That also closed in around 2004, I believe. And so they did save the aquarium. And of course, Belle Isle also has the new golf course. It has the new nature preserve area. The old golf course, the bridge is still there. The abandoned bridge is still there from the old golf course. But yeah, the zoo is just something I'm not really sure what they could do with the space. I think the only solution would be to demolish it, to be honest, which is a shame because the zoo is architecturally, I mean, it's beautiful. It looks really, really cool. I love the design of it, how they're all those little cone huts. I think the zoo looks really cool, but at this point, I don't think there's any way to save it. And, that whole bit of land there, I mean, it's just sitting there on the land, not really doing anything, Now, I don't know. Somebody could probably develop that land into something else. Maybe they could do more nature-y stuff on Belle Isle. I don't know what the Park Service has planned for Belle Isle, but yeah, the zoo, I mean, they do take effort to try to secure it. There's holes in the fences, and those holes are secured with chains and stuff. But of course, people come and cut the chains all the time. They do have a drone that they fly around that has a little thermal camera on it. I know a few friends that have been caught inside the zoo via the drone. In recent times, 2020, 2021, it seems like they've gotten more serious about keeping people out. When I was here this last time, I actually got caught up by the entrance. Right after I filmed the intro, there was a parks ranger just shouted. He was like, "Hey, get out of there." We were like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm talking to you." As it turns out, those turnstiles there actually work. It's unlocked to leave from the inside, but to go in, it's locked. But yeah, he had us leave from the turnstile, and then he couldn't go back to Belle Isle for the rest of the day. He gave us a one-day ban for Belle Isle. I mean, we were going to leave anyway, so it's not like that really did anything. But yeah,
well,
I mean, you can just see
a tiny bit about the policy, because there's a liability. If someone's in there and gets injured, they could sue, and so if it's owned by the government, even if you're there illegally, you get injured, you could sue, or just bad to have injuries there. And then the question about paying for it, that to have the place you know, torn down, uh, and just put to you're just to tear it down is expensive. So I mean, most of these places
Oh yeah.
are still there because where's the money going to come to actually uh, tear it down? So let me ask you about before I ask you about that, like the policy in the state of Decay, the graffiti, because I noticed some of these videos you're mentioning, you recognize the graffiti. So you say some of these are other crews that is there a connection between like urban frontiersmen and urban graffiti artists, or are they separate people that so that's just like a tag where you'll do, I don't know if that's like your Anarchy A or your American Frontierman. Like I don't know if you tag the sites or if the Urban Frontierman they just have like a little tag that they put there, or or if there's who are these graffiti artists? And some of these are actually very nice and artistic.
Um, I do have one friend in particular, Poetry by Boots. She's left tags all across the country. So for me, I always look for her stuff everywhere I go because it's kind of like a scavenger hunt. Every time I go to a new place, I'm always looking like, oh, did Boots tag this place? I always love finding her work. Other than that, I do have some other people like Beehoff Detroit, Mr. P Explorers. Those are a couple other friends I have in the Urbex community. They tag places that they go to. I sometimes I have chalk with me, and sometimes I'll tag a place in chalk. I don't. I want to get stickers to do it with stickers because those are a bit better. But I don't like using graffiti just because, in case I do get caught by security or police, I want to be doing as little like illegal stuff as possible. You know what I mean? I don't want to
But
get
tag is
caught
different than
as
graffiti. I guess you could consider tag graffiti, but if you're just like leaving your tag, as opposed to a lot of these places have substantial graffiti art. So you're saying like
yeah.
that these explorers that just leave a tag, but they're not going to be like the ones who paint something like this. And this obviously is a graffiti hub in Ann Arbor, but it seems that a lot of these places have pretty interesting graffiti art all over. And some of them even in out of the nook places or old buildings. I guess you have homeless people who may be living there or squatting. Or do you know much about graffiti or the people that would make that graffiti as opposed to just tagging?
Yeah, there's a number of people I follow on like Instagram and stuff that make really beautiful graffiti art. Um, there is a certain, interesting bit to it when you have like a lot of people see like an abandoned building, right? And they see an empty wall as like a canvas, and they make this beautiful, beautiful graffiti art there. And I do appreciate seeing that kind of thing because it can make a lot of places look a little bit more interesting. Um, and a lot of people put a lot of effort and time into making proper art with graffiti. Some of it's just really impressive. I don't even know how people do it sometimes. um, but yeah, and then there's people that leave like vulgar graffiti places and too, and that kind of thing always bothers me because it doesn't really make a place look better. But yeah, graffiti art is a really, really beautiful thing. And there's one actually, I think I talk about it in that Ann Arbor video, but there's a whole history behind graffiti, and without getting too much, into the details of the history of graffiti, the first ever graffiti found was actually in a cave in Egypt, and it was a political graffiti showing Cleopatra giving oral to Mark Antony. Basically, it was saying that Cleopatra is, constantly giving concessions to Rome all the time, and Egypt was just a puppet of Rome, which a lot of people weren't big fans of back then. But you see this all throughout history. There's graffiti dating back, hundreds of years. If you
To see
include like
Pompeii, I think
cave paintings,
or is it
yeah,
the ancient Roman site that had a volcano and
yeah, it
froze
was
it in
Pompeii.
time? Pompeii, the graffiti all over the place there, and a lot of it
Yeah,
was, some of them were just like I was here, or an advertisement for a business or political statements, and I guess also like the most ancient cave art of just like buffalo or something. But this was the one I think you mentioned, Oren Goldenberg. That like I first started my YouTube page. I was sharing the downtown cine guide, but Oren was on the board member. I guess to the Lincoln Street Art Project in Detroit. I think he's also on the board here. But this is actually like a government. Is this an underground, or this was like a government, legal, where they legalized the place for the purpose of graffiti art?
Yeah, that place, it is legal for all the art and stuff to be there. I'm not sure about the legality of a random person just going up and spray painting stuff, but I do know that the art enclave that actually owns the land and owns that area, they do graffiti, and they make sculptures and stuff in the area. And there's that plane that's there, that I'm not entirely sure how that plane got there, but I'm pretty sure the people that own the art park had it moved there. So you have a lot of artists that go there and paint and stuff like that, and they do a lot of events there where people can do stuff like that. And but as you can see, it looks like a lot of people do just show up and paint there, which is pretty cool. It reminds me a lot of the graffiti highway over in Centralia, which is gone now, by the way, which is a shame because I wanted to go back there, and I went there once and I wanted to go back there. I didn't film anything on it, and I really wish I did film something on it while I was there because they demolished it in 2020 because people were breaking COVID regulations there and going there and partying there, I guess. So the city demolished the whole graffiti highway, which is, or not the city, the state, which is really crappy because graffiti highway is a beautiful thing. But yeah, that Lincoln Street Art Park reminds me a lot of graffiti highway with how people just spray paint all over the road. But yeah, I mean, graffiti is one of those things that I think is extremely important to document because to me, graffiti is like the art of the underground, the art of the average person. You know what I mean? Graffiti is always very, very telling of a culture and the way that average people kind of live their life, because you see political graffiti, you see graffiti of, random people leaving their name there, and that sort of thing I feel like is indicative a lot of, people that live in that era and that culture and stuff like that. And that's the kind of thing that's sort of timeless. I feel like the way that historians look back at that ancient graffiti we were talking about, I feel like someday a lot of historians are going to look at the graffiti in abandoned buildings and stuff today, and they're looking back at the 21st century. You know what I mean?
I even looked this up because the story was so horrible, and I guess it didn't happen. The Hell's Bridge
Oh
story
yeah.
that although the bridge was actually kind of like um, it was hardly a sight worth looking at, and the story was more interesting than the bridge. I don't know if I could find it.
Yeah.
It was just a small crossing. Was this something that you heard about the story and decided you made a whole trip out to see?
Yeah, I wanted to do something for Halloween. I wanted to do like a Halloween special. Um, so I was trying to find like interesting sounding, like, haunted places or whatever. And of all the places I looked at, I mean, there's like a million haunted roads and there's like places like Hell, Michigan and stuff, but none of that sounded
That
too
story as a
interesting. But
kid,
then I heard
actually.
of this.
I might even heard that story as a kid. And you could see the bridge is just like a tiny steel thing that's loosely concrete.
Yeah. Yeah, that bridge, I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, was put up by the DNR as just a little crossing for the hiking path there. But the story behind it was wild. When I read that story, I was like, God, I want to do the Halloween special on this. This is freaking crazy. Of course, the story itself isn't true. It's just an urban legend because the bridge is actually just there as as a crossing, so you can get across the river. But yeah, it was a wild story. Oh,
Yeah,
this
this
place
dredge
was
site,
cool.
I guess this is just the last few months that's and the graffiti is significant. I mean, if this is out somewhere in the middle of nowhere, or maybe there's a surrounding town, but people would go to I mean, just the the whole site and the factory and the compound, and it was interesting. You made the here was what I was talking about earlier, the shrine of the snowshoe priest. Mentioned earlier
Yeah,
was an interesting story. You made the Upper Peninsula also.
yeah, it was beautiful up there in autumn. But yeah, that the Quincy Dredge is right around like Marquette and this whole area where there's tons of abandoned stuff. There's still a lot more to see up there, but there's tons of abandoned stuff around there because of the old copper mines and stuff like that. Now I do want to go back there and do more, but yeah, those dredgers and that little, the building back there are all part of the whole copper industry that used to be around Keweenaw and the UP.
Yeah, those are I mean, so the economics we were talking like who would pay for it, who would fix it, and so if it's something usable, you have some that you mentioned in your videos are actually for sale, and the prices like even right here, I think in Hamtramck you had apartment building that might need to be if it's not torn down, a few $100,000 that even like a small time landlord or business person could conceivably try to buy and fix up. I mean, the industrial sites that are probably greenfield, probably a toxic repair would be millions of dollars of investment to actually tear down, and then whatever's necessary to rehab the environmentally. You say you do some carpentry, or how much background do you have in construction? Have you ever thought about like like I'm going to buy one of these places and rehab it and become a landlord?
I have thought about it a lot. There's this one place, I believe it was the George Ferris School. I think that's what it was, over in Highland Park, where the person that bought it, he bought it for like $1,000. Like he bought this whole abandoned school for only like $1,000, and like that's just incredible. That you can see how big this place is. Obviously, it's really decayed, and it'll cost a lot of money to fix up or renovate something like that or demolish it. But still, buying a property like that for $1,000, like that's pretty freaking cheap. But yeah, I've always wanted to get into real estate someday and buy up a lot of these abandoned properties. Detroit in particular is undergoing a lot of development right now, and someday I think it would be cool to turn a lot of these places into parks and stuff like that, or to turn them into like art, enclaves and stuff like that. Some of these buildings, I think it'd be way too costly to try to renovate them and turn them into anything. I think it'd be better, to probably demolish it and turn that area into some kind of like natural area or like a park of some kind, or like put some kind of new development there. I know there's a lot of people putting a lot of money into Detroit right now and trying to turn the city around. So I think in time, a lot of these abandoned places are going to be gone. If I couldn't give an exact number, but I'd say probably, you know, by the latter half of the 21st century, I think Detroit's going to be a completely different city, with how much money is being poured into it, and that Detroit's now getting a lot of. I know a lot of people are now coming to Detroit because uh, cities like New York and LA are just getting really expensive, and there's a lot of artists, especially that want to live in the big city, but these other cities are just way too pricey. So a lot of people are moving to Detroit now. So now you have more people coming into Detroit. And so I think, Detroit's going to be undergoing a lot of changes here soon. And, I love exploring abandoned buildings, but I also really love Detroit. And I really hope that the city's image kind of gets turned around, because there's a lot of people I've talked to, especially when I was in the Army, that just assume that Detroit is some, you know, place that's falling apart, full of crime and gangs around every corner. I've been to Detroit plenty of times, never been mugged, never seen any gang activity, never seen any crimes. You know what I mean? Like, Detroit's not, the way that people think it is or the way that the media portrays it. So I would really like to see Detroit sort of make a comeback and start to change its image around, because it is a wonderful city. It is a really beautiful city, and I really love the city of Detroit. And I would really like to see, more people want to vacation there, more people want to visit it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean I'm in Metro Detroit. I know a lot of people involved in various activities. Since I was in University of Michigan, we took courses in civil engineering and urban planning, and been to government meetings. So the city itself tore down tens of thousands of abandoned houses. You could purchase like a house that you might have more luck in rehabbing, assuming that the government is going to have water and gas and electricity, or even the roads, or the basic infrastructure services that you could consider uh, rehabbing, let alone a building. And then even if you buy a foreclosure bundle that could cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in Detroit, that they have like the foreclosure auctions, and a lot of times they'll do a bundle, and that will include houses, commercial and industrial buildings. And the industrial buildings are usually not worth anything because they're too expensive to tear down, and they're actually a liability. So if you own it, you could be sitting on a liability that could cost you money over a period of time, because you might have environmental considerations. And then there's a whole bunch of government special programs if you are actually going to make a development on like a green site that would be included in an environmental fix, because most of the industrial buildings are in need of you know sizable investment into environmental repair, which could include like uh, digging up toxic sites, septic tanks, or older construction sites where they just dumped hazardous materials that are still sitting there decades later, that could cost substantial amounts of money. And then you have to bring in new soil to try to rehab it, or that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a whole bunch of government incentives, and so I mean Detroit is unique because the population decline that it was built. There was over 1.5 million, maybe upwards of 2 million people living here, and the numbers, I don't know if they're now like 700,000, hovering about that point. So there's still tens of thousands of abandoned houses, and there the obviously the schools that you covered, and the industrial base has really declined. They're never going to be likely an industrial base in Detroit like there used to be. So there's just tens, hundreds of these plants, and they're a disaster. They have toxic environmental damage. They would all cost hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars, just to demolish the building and turn it into grasslands again. And the city can't afford to do it. It's not quite profitable enough for a private company to do it, like in certain areas downtown, but most of Detroit, it wouldn't be profitable to buy an industrial site, tear it down, and build like housing on it. And so it's unlikely to happen even in the foreseeable decades. That it leaves opportunity for small time investors. Like I said, like yeah, you might be able to buy that school for $1,000. You might be able to find some usable part of it where the structure's good enough where for tens of thousands of dollars you could work with the existing structure. But yeah, it's tough to know. And like historically, Michigan, because like the auto supply used to be largely done just in Michigan, and now has become globalized. But there's probably thousands of these abandoned places all over Michigan that have little chance of ever being used again. And if a newer company technology has changed, like robotics and the infrastructure, that they will all have to be torn down. I'm not sure. Do you know much about that? I mentioned Bright Sun Films and the abandoned. I see they even get invited to some sites. They got a huge channel with over 1 million subs. So even to get publicity to some of these sites or campaigns to raise money, they'll even invite them for tours. But they maybe have more expertise to give construction estimates on like an understanding of what would need to be done to rehab a site, or the type of money and construction that would be involved. Is that something you're studying or think about when you're doing this?
Yeah, a lot of times, when I'm at a lot of these sites, I do think a lot about what could be done with it. Obviously, a lot of research and effort needs to go into trying to renovate or turn a site into something else. And being in construction, I've actually worked on renovations of different buildings around Central Michigan, and I mostly I do like industrial and commercial, construction. So I don't do anything residential, but yeah, there's a lot of work we need to go into, tearing down a place or renovating a place. So you have to have a good, solid plan before you go into it. Uh, and there are a lot of locations out there that I just look at and I just feel like, you know, obviously, I haven't done, the research of paying money to have somebody survey the site or anything like that. But there are places that I've been to where just looking at it and looking at the surrounding area, I would think things like, there's like, for example, there'd be neighborhoods that have been completely demolished, right? And there'd just be an open plot there. And I look at an open plot like that and I'm just like, you could probably turn this into like a little park or something, like a little natural area, plant some trees there, set up some, a statue or something, like make it like a nice little park. You have a lot of places like, New York City, for example, they do that a lot. There's a lot of, you go around, even just Manhattan and Brooklyn, Queens, there's parks everywhere. Every few blocks, there's a park there. And I think in Detroit, it'd be good to, try to do something like that too. Obviously, you can't do that in every area, but there's a lot of places that would benefit from being turned into a park or being turned into some kind of, artist enclave or, something like that, better than just leaving open plots everywhere and leaving, abandoned buildings everywhere.
I followed a few years ago. Did you hear about the Detroit mass mob movement with all the old churches where they had a new one each month and conducted mass in, and a lot of them, were beautiful churches from like 100 years ago that were largely abandoned. Some of them they were able to, through that movement, to actually raise up some funds and interest. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with the mass mob movement? I think it's also in Chicago and a few other cities. I have done that with synagogues in New York. We used to do that. Go to a different synagogue each month, and a lot of them were kind of out of use. Some of them we tried to revive just by going there. Was that something you followed?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of these churches would benefit from things like that because there's a few that I've been to, like the what was it called? The Guardian Angel Church in Detroit, for example. It's a beautiful church, like beautiful stained glass windows. I actually got in contact with people who used to go to that church, and they actually gave me this PDF document that had all the history of the church that was documented. There's a Facebook group and stuff for all the people I went there. There's pictures on there. There's a lot of documentation for this place. Uh, and yet, it's falling apart. It's freaking, the roof is almost caved in. There's evidence of vandalism, and every year the place gets closer and closer to just caving in on itself and being gone. Uh, but that church, would be perfect. Like, it's in a condition right now where I think it can be saved. You know what I mean? It's not so far gone that it's, can't be saved. I think it can definitely be saved. At the very least, those beautiful stained glass windows could be saved. It's a really, really beautiful church. But then there's also other things like the City Methodist Church in Gary, Indiana. Like, that's an example of a place that's probably too far gone. There have been a number of attempts to renovate it, a number of attempts to motivate, investors and people to buy it and try to fix it, but nobody wants to do it because at this point, the roof is already caved in. Half the building is freaking pretty much gone now. It's just falling apart, and renovating it and fixing it would just be too expensive. I think the city is just waiting for it to completely fall apart so they have an excuse to go in there and demolish whatever is left. Assuming that they could even afford to, because Gary, Indiana, is not a city that has a whole lot of money. So I think there are a lot of churches that do need a movement like that to help save it. There's actually a synagogue I know of in Chicago that was saved. It was abandoned, and in, I believe it was 2016, renovations on it began, and it actually it was saved. It's operating now, and it was a beautiful synagogue. So there is hope for a lot of these places. It's just you got to get the word out there, and you just got to find someone or a group of people that are able to work to save the building. A good example of that would be the Potter Street station. I filmed something on that back in August. I actually interviewed the society that's trying to save it. Uh, and I talked a lot with them about the efforts they're doing to try to save the Potter Street station. With Biden's new infrastructure bill, they're actually trying to get the station to be approved to be turned into like a bus depot. They want to turn it over to the government so it can become a proper bus depot, like a Greyhound depot or something like that. But the problem is that in order to do a structural survey, they need $200,000, and they only have like $60,000 raised towards that goal. But the Potter Street Station is this beautiful, Victorian architecture, and it's one of those buildings that, at least unlike a lot of buildings I've been to, at least this one has a group of people that are trying to save it. Like they're really passionate about trying to save this building. But it's one of those things where so few people know about it that, they're struggling to get money, even just to, they need to fix the roof, for example. I mean, even just to maintain the property, they're struggling to get the funds and the help they need, to renovate the building and fix it. But at
Was that the
least
one that was hit by arson?
Say again?
Was that the one that got hit by arson?
Yeah, there was an arsonist that burned down the roof and burned down part of the building.
Yeah, that was an interesting video. I mean, some of the just natural, rise and fall decline that like demographic change, where people, when they first come to America, largely came in ethnic groups from certain countries and headed in the city. Like here in Southfield, on my corner is the Highland Park Baptist Church, which used to be in Highland Park, but you moved to the suburbs. As a kid, I was Temple Bethel in the suburbs that started in the city. It was just a natural migration that people first came in the city and developed communal infrastructure, and then moved out into the suburbs, and so it's just natural decay that there's no use for the those buildings anymore.
Yeah, and when you look at it too, a lot of it's really sad because, the Potter Street Station video, I have old pictures of the street that it's on, and compared it to what it looks like today. Across from the station, there used to be shops there. There was churches. There was like a school. It was an entire street. It was like this area was like its own city, like its own town. It was beautiful. It was full of life, and obviously as people moved away and it became abandoned, it all got demolished. They were actually going to demolish the Potter Street Station too until it was saved in the 80s. But when I see something like that, it's just sad because I'm thinking about it and I'm just like, they could have put the effort in to save that, and they could have turned it into like a tourist trap or like a museum or something like that. There's a number of places that I've been to that have done that, like Lincoln County, Lincoln, New Mexico, where the Lincoln County War happened. They saved that town. It's a lot of people consider it a ghost town because nobody actually like lives in the town except for like a few people. But they saved the town, and there's the courthouse is renovated. All the buildings are renovated. You go there, and there are people that are dressed up like they're in the 1800s. They'll walk around like they're cowboys and stuff like that. It's like a whole tourist trap, but it's a real historic town where the Lincoln County War actually happened. They put these little like plastic sheets up over parts of the wall where there are bullet holes and stuff to preserve the history, to show like when Billy the Kid escaped out of the courthouse, they still have the bullet holes and like the blood stain on the wall from a guy that he shot while he was escaping. And it's stuff like that. It's really incredible to see the effort they went through to preserve that town. And there's a number of other towns that do that around the country. So when I see something like Potter Street Station and it had this, beautiful, whole like, 19th century city that used to be there, and then knowing that they demolished, the whole thing, they almost got rid of all of it. It's just sad because they could have put the effort in to save it, and they could have turned it into, a kind of, tourist attraction, a place where you could go and everybody's dressed like, they're, in the 1800s or whatever, like a lot of other places do. But of
It was
course,
demographic
you need
change.
the
That, I mean, the people were
yeah,
there at a certain point in time for a certain reason that no longer exists and have moved on. And if the place where like Detroit, there's different people living there now for a different reason, and the type buildings and stuff that they need might not make sense. That what was built decades ago, if those people moved on to the suburbs, or the industrial things changed. That I mean, it's natural that things are going to change like that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of things are worth preserving, certainly.
yeah. I mean, a lot of places, when you do have that change, a lot of places don't, you don't necessarily have to get rid of what was there. You could try to change it into something else, something new. And if there is no other like perfect utility for it, some places, like I said, like a tourist trap museum kind of thing could be turned into, something like that, preserved in some kind of way. Um, so I think that freaking there's just a lot of places, the Potter Street Station is just one of many places that there are people that are actively trying to save, but I think that there's a lot of places that really need the attention, that really need people to really look at it. You know what I mean?
For some reason, my computer's frozen. Obviously, I still hear you. I hope the video's still live. I'm probably going to have to restart. So maybe we should wrap it up. I really appreciate you responding to my message and sharing your project. I definitely enjoy your videos. Do you want to say quickly how you came up with your never be forgotten? Was it just random? I noticed in some of your earlier videos you didn't have that, but that's how you conclude all your videos now, with that never be forgotten.
Um, it's just I always imagine that every part of history is important. I spend a lot of time studying history from all over the world, and even just small parts of history, like an abandoned building and stuff like that, don't deserve to be forgotten. You know what I mean? I think all history needs to be remembered and documented in some capacity. So when I say, it'll never be forgotten, I mean, that location, the place that I'm filming at, the history behind it is now going to be remembered. It's since it's now been documented thoroughly, it'll never be forgotten. You know what I mean? That's sort of the tagline I came up with, because I was thinking about, you know, how these places, like how every bit of history just needs to be remembered in some aspect. So I figured, I started saying that at the end of the videos, because it was kind of like a cheeky little thing that circles back to the main reason why I do this, is just so that way no part of history gets forgotten. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. I was just searching randomly for videos on Detroit and came across yours, and I watched all of them, and definitely gained a lot. And I watched actually all of your Michigan series, and maybe I'll check out some of your other videos also, just because I want to know more about Michigan history, especially Detroit. And I don't know, COVID-19, if this will ever end. Definitely, if you're in Detroit, meet up. I'll treat you to lunch or something, and I definitely look forward to your future videos and appreciate that. And wish you the best of luck if you do move on, and like become a landowner, or make go for some rehabs or something. That would definitely be interesting. I like the genre also. I think it has like you said at the beginning, most of the world's already been explored. There is no real frontier anymore. So you have the abandoned frontier that is largely the urban area. So it's an interesting genre, just kind of like postmodernist understanding of what's happening in our world.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Like I said before, this is the first time I've ever been the one getting interviewed, so it was an interesting experience. But I appreciate talking with you, and thank you for liking the content. Thank you for enjoying it.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, if you're coming to Detroit, there's probably not much we could do with COVID and who knows when it's going to end. But if it does end, like definitely, be happy to meet up, treat you to lunch or something. Definitely support your work, and I put the link to your channel. So anyone watching could sub to American Decay, and this like a hobby. You're not planning like turning this into a business. I don't. You have a Patreon or anything, or you just you do this, so to say, out of your own pocket?
Right now, yeah, it's all out of my own pocket. I do want to grow it into a proper, I would like to do it full time. I would like to be able to hire like a team, and my ultimate goal in the long run is to turn American Decay into like a real news media company. Someday, years from now, I want to get into doing like war journalism and doing things like exploring different cultures and stuff like that all over the world. I kind of want to, I kind of got inspired a bit by what Vice News, used to be. How Vice News used to do, really good pieces on different things from around the world, and especially war journalism and stuff like that. That's stuff that I want to get into in the future. But before I can get to that point, I need to establish a base. I need to grow the channel to the point where it's profitable, and I need to actually, get more experience with interviewing people and traveling and the trying to get a journalistic side to it before I can start doing the more serious documentaries in the future. But that is the path that I want to take with it. But even if it never gets to that point, it's still fun just to explore abandoned buildings and to film these documentaries. So
Yeah, stick with it. Yeah, I follow like Peter Santinello travelogues all over the world. He did Detroit recently. Dearborn interviews, and he's got hundreds of thousands of subs, and he makes a living, travels the world, travelogues. So there's definitely potential in it. Just stick with it. Keep on studying the history. Keep on popping out the videos, working on your game, upping the quality. Uh, and hopefully your dreams come true in that. And then, certainly, at least when you got some people appreciate your work. And interviews, definitely a good way just to cross collaborations with other people in a similar genre, or even asking for interviews or just speaking with other people about what you're doing. Definitely a good way to build up, the base. Even if you don't, they definitely know your work's appreciated, and you got some people that learned a lot from what you're doing already.
thank you. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday.
Okay, you too. Thanks a lot. So be in touch. And my computer's frozen, so I'm actually going to restart. So you could just log off. Hopefully, the video is going to upload and everything properly. I'm going to have to restart. So take care.
All right, you too.